Today's video was selected for you by my gorgeous patrons, so thank you very much to them for making this selection. And if you would like to be involved in future video polls and also have access to the Discord, the one card riff video every month and other privileges as well, check out the tiers. I will leave all the information down below. Hello chickens. Well, I've been putting this one off. I'm not going to lie. The results came in from the poll and I realised I was going to be making a video about shadow work relating to my sense of self, relating to my identity. And I was really excited and then I got quite afraid. And I was like, oh, that's actually a little bit more exposing and a little bit more vulnerable than I even considered it to be when I put that video option up at the time. So I went from being thrilled to feeling a little bit terrified, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. You know what? I like to keep my Patreon promises, and this is what was voted in the poll as the most popular video option. And you know what? I put the goddamn video options up, all right? So I cannot say shit. I cannot blame this on anyone else. This is all on me. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to be a bit raw in this video, and I've tried filming it a couple of times and turned it off at about the 4 or 5 minute mark. So I'm going to try and relax, drop my shoulders, and just, you know what? Speak to you as one shadow worker to another, whoever you are. I'm sure if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you've done yourself some shadow work, you've looked into issues surrounding your identity, the way you perceive yourself, the way you're perceived by others, the way you operate in the world, you know, and any inconsistencies in your ethics or your behaviours, you know, in alignment with who you would like to view yourself to be or how you think you are, you know. So I've gone through those journeys too. I've had those trials as well. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about in this video are things that I think have largely been ironed out now. You know, I've come to the point of integrating those things into my sense of self. Other things are definitely issues that I'm still grappling with, and I have not come to a satisfactory conclusion. I don't feel like those issues are integrated. So you'll probably be able to tell the difference, I think, between one and the other. You'll be able to tell from the way I talk about it and, of course, the information I reveal on it. So I'm definitely not going to be talking in this video about every single thing related to my identity struggles, you know, but I'm going to talk about a few key ones that I think are, you know, they have a lot of juice in them. They've definitely been a big thorn in my side, a big problem over the course of time, and I've had a lot of questioning on them and I have shadow worked them. So without further ado, let's get into the finer points of my insecurities and issues with my selfhood. Oh my goddess, why am I doing this? Yes, no, this is good. It's good for the soul. Let's get on with it. In general, I would say that I have a very strong sense of self, you know, so I think that it's, and I think other people in my life would agree largely with me about what my sense of self is. So I don't think I'm under that many illusions. I think everybody's probably under one or two illusions about the way they come across, the way they operate, the way they make people feel or whatever. You know, no one has a perfect grasp of who they are and how they're perceived and how they come across. But I like to think that I'm very honest about myself, about the fact that I'm not perfect. I definitely have flaws. I definitely see those flaws, you know, and I think that if a bunch of people that know me and have known me for, let's say, a year and a half or more, if you took them and you put them each in a separate room in a house and you interviewed them all and you asked them questions like, give me a list of Kellyanne's qualities. Give me a list of Kellyanne's flaws. What would Kellyanne do in this situation? What makes Kellyanne happy? What makes Kellyanne irritated? I feel that when you collated all that data downstairs at the big kitchen table, there would be a lot of overlap. I am just a fairly consistent person in general. I have my nuances, I have my different moods that I get into, but again, like, they are moods that people are aware of. Like, once you start to become a frequent presence in my life, you will start to recognize that, like, yeah, I have these moods, I have these various sort of like states of being, but they're not a mystery. They tend very rarely to come out of nowhere and surprise either me or the people I'm with. And I've always liked that I have that consistent sort of personality per se. I don't think that it means something awful if you are a more changeable kind of personality. And in fact, I know that some people can be very changeable and have lots of different sort of sides to themselves and be not as predictable. And yet they are aware of that. They're not unaware of that. You know, they know. And I think that they don't do it to be devious. You know, I do think that there's some sort of chameleon-like behavior, some changeability of personality that does come from a devious place. And I have seen that in at least a couple of individuals that have sort of crossed my path and certainly switched and changed their preferences, their personality, you know, whatever, in order to obtain something from someone or from a group of people. And that has been clearly sort of like quite cynically done or quite consciously done, deviously done. And so I think for a long time in my life, I felt like my consistency of personality is part of what makes me show integrity. It's part of what makes me a decent person, is that I can say I'm consistent, you know, once you know me, you know me, there are no surprises. And I think I might have pressured myself in that way, you know, at certain points when I was younger, for sure. But I do like it about myself as well. I think it makes me easier to deal with, both professionally and personally. And for my mental health issues, it definitely makes it easier for me to deal with myself. Yeah, so I wanted to sort of start by mentioning that. I do have a fairly consistent Kellyanne that I am, you know. Sometimes I surprise myself and I don't know how I feel, or I don't know why I did what I did, or I'm not really sure what's going on. But for the majority of the time, like I said, if you got a bunch of people, put them in separate rooms, they would pretty much agree. I have a very strong personality too, and I'm going to get into why that in itself has been a bit of a shadow for me in the past, and why I've had to sort of like really work through that and think about what it means to be a strong, full frontal, assertive, very present personality in a room. But I actually wanted to start with something much more integral to the plot of my identity, something that happened when I was much younger, that not too many people are aware of, although if you've watched a couple of my lives, you might be aware, or if you got involved in a certain Twitter thread a while ago that got a little bit busy. I think it was on Facebook first. Yeah, I think it was on Facebook. Yeah, a certain Facebook thread on my page that got a little bit spicy for a minute, then you will know that actually I come from a different part of England. I don't come from the south of England. I was actually born up north. I was born in a town near Liverpool in Merseyside. And so my accent when I was growing up, for a chunk of my life when I was younger, was markedly different to the accent you hear before you. And you might think to yourself, oh, well, people move around, people change their accent, they change the way they speak. You know, why would that be a big sort of shadow of the identity? Well, let me tell you for why, chickens. Let me tell you. When my mum and dad broke up when I was a kid, my mum got with this other guy, and this other guy did not have a northern accent like my dad and my dad's side of the family, or like me, okay, or like my sister. He had a southern accent that sounds rather like this one, okay? And so when my mum moved in with him, and of course we were with her, right, when she moved in with him, he very quickly began to train me to speak differently. So, you know, I was very quickly made aware that the way that I was speaking was not okay anymore. And I have a very, very distinct memory. It's coming through now, clear as a fucking bell, clear as a bell, guys, of my stepdad. When I said something in a northern accent, right, I said bath or laugh or path or whatever it was. And I remember him turning to me and saying, it's a long A, bath, laugh, path. And it was very much like this. This was the situation, right? I was no longer allowed to speak how I spoke. And if you can see that I'm getting animated, it's because it took a very, very long time for me, to realise that this was emotionally abusive, and it was partly designed to break me down and to change something that was actually quite integral to me and was actually far more important to me at that time than I ever could have realised, because I was only a small child. But it was very much a part of my identity in ways that I couldn't yet voice. And, you know, I think anyone who has a regional accent of any kind in their own country will know what I'm trying to say by this, okay? Accents make people infer a lot about you. They make you feel kin with other people who have the same accent. You presume things about each other based on accent. You feel closer to your family, perhaps, based on a shared accent. Whether or not these things are right or wrong, that is really what happens. That is the lay of the land. And so I was having something taken from me in a way that was making me feel ashamed of it in ways that I didn't understand at that time. I was confused by. And I was not having anyone tell me, like, this is not okay, because my family up north didn't really understand that this was happening. They just understood that every single time they saw me, my accent was developing rapidly away from the northern accent to this, you know, clipped southern accent. Now, when I would go back up north and I would visit with my family, or even sometimes just visiting with my dad on the weekend, I would come home to the house where I lived with this new guy who became my stepdad, and I would have the northern accent again. I would have slipped back into it, obviously, because that was my fucking accent, right? And I would be chastised. I would be told off. I would feel threatened. I would feel like that was not okay. And that was voiced, you know? And so I was scared to speak like me, and I very quickly learned to adapt to this new way of speaking. Like I said, it took me until I was in my 30s, guys, to realise that this is actually really fucked up, and it really did a number on me. It took me that long because I used to explain it to people, because if you've watched my lives or whatever, or if you're one of my patrons, you know, I like an accent. I mean, you can probably notice it from when I'm just doing a video. Sometimes I'll just slip into northern or slip into some sort of American accent. It's just something that I do. I used to be an actress, okay? I love the way different people speak, and often when I'm in conversation with friends, I'll just slip into some sort of accent. It's not supposed to be disrespectful. It's just like something that I do. I am, as my fellow Sagittarius friend says, I am all the theatrics and hopefully none of the drama. So it's a very sad thing to say. So yeah, like I sort of am keen on accents. You know, I like to experiment with them, and I find them interesting, really, as a rule. So sometimes when I would be around friends and at parties and raves and stuff, I would go into my original accent, or into like a very strong Scouse accent, which is, you know, adjacent to the accent I was partly raised with when I was younger, my original accent. And people would say, Kelly, that is the best one of all the accents you do. And I used to say, well, that's because it's actually my accent. Aha! Like, that's why I'm so good at it, because it's actually how I used to speak, and it's how my family speak. And then after a while, as I got into my 30s, one or two people that I told this to would say, that's really screwed up that your stepdad did that to you. That's horrible. Why would you be forced to speak differently as a kid and made to feel like your original accent was not okay? That's like awful. And I felt like really stunned that I hadn't recognised before that this could be so harmful. I resented it. I didn't like it, but it took me a long time to realise, like, that's a shadow in my identity. And it was when I was growing up. When I would go home to visit my family, I hated that my cousins spoke in my original accent and I didn't speak like that anymore. I didn't like it. It made me feel other to the family that I came from. Your accent, anywhere in the world, but I can only speak to the UK. I can only, you know, speak to that experience. Your accent has got a lot to do with what people infer about your class, about your upbringing, about your beliefs and attitudes about things. Largely, this is wrong. But it does happen. So say, for example, there is a big north-south divide in the UK. There just always has been. A lot of it is playful and fun, and, you know, like what bands come from the best places, etc. Nice, you know. But a lot of it is what's the word? Is it bigoted? I don't know. It's judgmental. It's discriminatory. Okay. Like, a lot of people in the South do have discriminatory views against northern accents and vice versa. There's like a classic scene in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, you know, where the London guy is like fucking northern whatever, and the northern guys are like fucking southern fairies. Like, that is a classic joke about the north-south divide in the UK. It's a very real thing. Very real thing. And there is this mistaken notion that people that speak like me are posh, that they've been well educated. That's actually ridiculous. There's loads of people in the home counties that speak like me, okay? And they come from all kinds of different backgrounds. But the assumption is that the sound of this accent means certain things about what kind of house you lived in, what kind of beliefs you have about things, what way you vote in elections, that kind of stuff. And the idea is more that, like, if you have a northern accent, then you must be like from a stalwart working class background, and you must, you know, have certain political views in this way, and you probably come from this kind of background. Again, it's ridiculous. It's a foolish thing to assume. You can be posh and have a Scouse accent. You can come from a lot of money and have a northern accent. You like, I saw a Youngblood interview the other day and it really interested me because I knew I was like getting ready to do this video. I saw an interview with Youngblood yesterday. He is a charming guy. And he said that a lot of people say that he is faking being working class because of his accent. And how he actually comes from money and he went to a stage school. And he was saying, it's ridiculous because I never said I didn't come from money, and I never said that I didn't go to a stage school. I never said I was broke. I just happened to come from Doncaster, so I speak like this. All my family speak like this. It doesn't mean anything about what class you come from economically or anything like that. And it made me laugh because it's so true. A lot of people make the assumption that you are like stalwartly working class and you've had a specific type of upbringing if you come from the north, right? And I know that that's ridiculous. However, for me, there was this other layer to it because I was raised in a stalwart, politicized working class kind of family background where I was very proud of my family's history, and I was raised like with certain beliefs, many of which I still have. Having examined them for myself and come to the conclusion that they are indeed the right ones. So it was difficult because it further took me away. Like on the one hand, I knew that people just assume things about your accent that really don't match up. You know, people have a lot of ignorance when it comes to accents in the UK, lots of ignorance. They make snap judgments based on how you speak. It's true. It does happen. So it was annoying for me because even though I know that that is on them, that is the problem of just having a small world around you, small group of friends, not knowing anybody from the north or conversely from the south, and so thinking certain things, you know, like, oh, you're snobby if you're from the south or whatever. I know that that is actually on the individual that doesn't know that, but because I wanted to be perceived in a certain way, I was resentful that my accent was taken from me because it implied the things I wanted it to imply, you know, which was like, you know, I'm a working class girl, come from the mean streets of Merseyside. I don't fucking know. This video is so cringe. Oh my God, I hate it. So yes, I do want to stress to you that like having my accent warped by force, like forcibly warped, was difficult. It made me feel less close to my family. It made me feel like they were going to think I was rejecting them because I was taking on this new accent so quickly. I was constantly trying to do the long A and sound like a southerner, and I was worried it was going to affect my relationship with my family, you know, and I felt like other to my family. I didn't like it. I liked my accent. I was so confused why I had to change my accent. It was like a really weird time for me, right? It didn't just happen naturally from just going to school and assimilating. No, it was enforced at home and I didn't fucking like it. And so there was that. But then as I grew up and I have this accent, it also created these weird shadowy moments in my experiences. I remember a small handful of, less than 10, but definitely more than 5 experiences in my 20s in particular, where people would go, yeah, but you would think that, Kelly, because you're middle class. Or yeah, well, you would think that because you probably come from money, so you wouldn't understand whatever. And I would never let that go. I would really, I want to say blow up. I didn't like lose my shit, but I immediately was like, you know, I was telling that person. And actually people that have known me for a really long time, especially my best friend who's known me nearly 11 years now, have a joke. I can't believe I'm telling you guys this. I can't believe I'm saying this on the internet. They have a joke about me, about something that I would say when the issue of my background would come up. I would say, I was born in a 2 up, 2 down up north, and my mum was a cleaner and my dad was a window fitter. So don't you fucking tell me. And apparently this would come at like, that became my stock thing. It's like an elevator pitch, right? If you want to tell somebody quickly that they've got you fucked up and they're wrong about you, they're wrong about where you come from, they're wrong about what you had, etc., you have this quick elevator pitch. And I didn't even realize that had become the thing that I said. But like now, every so often, and I laugh about it now, but at the time it was really rather serious, right? I did not want to be misunderstood, and I did not want people thinking that I came from this background that I didn't fucking come from, or that my parents did even, or my parents' parents, you know, because I felt like it was so deeply wounding to me that people would get that wrong about me, that they'd make such huge sweeping assumptions about my experiences and therefore disqualify me from having an opinion on something that I actually understood from experience a lot of the time. And so nowadays we laugh about it, where I'll be like, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And my best friend will go, yeah, your mum was a cleaner, your dad was a window fitter, we all know. Like, even if I wasn't going to say that, which I would never say that now, like, I don't care now. I went through a massive bit of shadow work around this, where I was like, why does it even matter if people mistake you for posh? Why do you care if people mistake you for middle class? Like, why don't you just let that go anyway? Not that middle class is necessarily posh, but like, people, because of the amount of words I have at my disposal as well, it's not even just about the way I speak, it's the amount of fucking words that I've got ready to go. They're in the oven, they're ready. For some reason, people just think this means things about me. And for a long time, it really bothered me, guys. It really bothered me. I had to do some major shadow work around it. And I had to come back to me. And, you know, part of it was about being grateful in a way, because there is a discrimination against regional accents in the UK. And I was actually watching some footage it was like 1950s footage, I think. So like post-war footage, maybe late 50s, early 60s. Really fascinating black and white footage of so this guy went up north to a town, I don't know where, but he was interviewing people up north about things that southern people had said about them. That they're dirty, that they eat out of like pan lids, that they eat fish and chips every night of the week or whatever. Just stupid southern, like gross assumptions about the north, which were much more prevalent then. Obviously now, with the advent of the internet and everything, and upward mobilization, meaning like people, we go where we want now, right? We have a much wider circle of friends, we're more connected. Back then it wasn't the case. Southerners had a much more ingrained sense of what the north, by gum, it's grim up north. They had this idea of what the north was all about, right? And it was making me laugh, because I was like, God, I went through this though. I went through this a bit, to be like, you don't put me in the wrong category. I'd rather be seen as dirty than be seen as snobby. They're both crappy and they're both based on nothing, but I'd rather be in that one than be in this one. And now I'm in this one, I don't like it, I need to tell people. So that was a big thing. I had to shadow work that. And I had to shadow work the fact that for so long, I had not really recognised what a gross violation of my selfhood it was to have my accent taken from me. Would I have spoken like this now if my accent had not been forcibly changed? I have no fucking idea. I've been down here a long time. And I'm further down south now than I was then. Like down where I am now in Kent, people speak with a kind of, it's almost like a bit of, well, it's a Kentish accent, but to me it sounds a bit like a nondescript London accent in a way. The beautiful accent, the Kentish accent, very nice. You know, so of course my accent's morphed a little bit here and there, but like, I don't know how I would sound. But what I'm telling you is that what happened to me was not okay. And I really had to shadow work that. And I had to shadow work this much bigger issue. A lot of shadow work is really interesting because it's about something that's really bothering you. And a lot of it is wedged down into the unconscious. You haven't realised it's there. You just see the tip of the iceberg one day and you're like, oh, that went right down to the core. That went down to the abyss of my internal ocean. What is that? What is that Leviathan that's swimming down there? Why is that so bothersome to me? And you start pulling it out and examining it and you're like, oh my sweet Christ, this is horrible. You know, and what's interesting is sometimes it's attached to much wider issues. It is attached to your culture, your race, your class, your gender, and all of that stuff. And so it becomes much bigger than the sum of its parts. You know, me asking myself, why does it matter if people get your class wrong? Why does it matter if people think you didn't struggle for money? Why does it matter if people assume, you know, that you had the benefit of certain things? Why does that matter? Then that would link into, well, it matters in terms of like the friendships that I can make and the respect that I have in certain rooms and the ability to be able to, you know, like it. And then I thought to myself, why is that? That goes beyond me. That's about culture. That's about politics. That's about propaganda and how I am just roped into that propaganda. So it became a very big piece of shadow work. And so I wanted to start there because I think that's a very interesting, very, very sort of like, what's the word? Like very real piece of shadow work. It's about how I'm perceived, how I perceive myself, and how to make my peace with what I became. You know, not of my own volition, but just the way things ended up, just the way things turned out, you know. Another big piece of the puzzle for me, darlings, is my queer identity. And yes, I have become more comfortable with the Q word. Some of you may remember my video about bisexuality, about biphobia, bi-erasure, and, you know, growing up as a bisexual person. And if you did not get a chance to watch that video and you would like to, I will leave it down below. I posted it on Bi Visibility Day, I think 2 years ago, but maybe 3 years ago. I don't know. The pandemic messed everything up for me in terms of what year was which, to be honest. Maybe it was 2020, but maybe it was 2019. I can't remember. But anyway, I mentioned in that video that I don't actually vibe with the word queer myself. I don't mind other people using it. I didn't mind other people using it, but I preferred to just say bisexual. And that's partly because queer was used as a slur against me in school and stuff like that. So I had a very sort of, and there's other reasons I don't like the word queer or didn't like the word queer, but I'm becoming much more fond of it now. It just really is a shortcut to a lot of things that I'm trying to say. So, you know, things that are not just inclusive of me, but inclusive of like the culture in general. And so I realized that it's actually semantically very useful to use queer as an umbrella term. And so I'm much more fond of it now. I've had certain conversations where it's become like, you know, necessary for me to use the word queer, and also other people are using it. And so I slipped into using it and I was like, come in here, the water's fine. So yes, I use that word now to describe myself. My queer identity, specifically as a bisexual woman, is very convoluted and has been something that I've needed to shadow work. What can I say about it? I mean, there's a very specific experience that bisexuals have. And even with the word bisexual, that had to be shadow worked because I was raised up and came into queer culture in a time where the word pansexual was not an available term. We did not use that term in any broad sense, right? And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who had a serious girlfriend before I had a serious boyfriend. I went to gay clubs. I went to gay pubs underage. You know, I went to gay protests. I protested against Section 28. So, you know, if pansexual was around, I would have heard it. I'm not saying it wasn't used somewhere in some cool New York boroughs, but not anywhere around me. All right. So, so that wasn't available. So I've also had to shadow work why I have still an affection and an obligation, I suppose, an emotional obligation towards the word bisexual. And I do speak about that in the video that I'll link down below. And it helped to be able to find content creators, especially like Verilybitchie, who makes incredible content about bisexuality. I will leave her channel down below. Absolutely amazing, like tip top, grade A bisexual content about the whole landscape of bisexuality. So yeah, it helped to find content creators like that kind of showed me why I have a fondness for it, even though technically I'm much better described as pansexual. So I had to shadow work that. I had to shadow work that part of the bisexual experience that a lot of bisexual people watching this will absolutely nod their head to right now when I say that you don't fully belong in straight culture and you don't fully belong in queer culture. It's a no man's land sometimes. It just really feels like you're missing a sense of belonging to either area. It just does, you know. And you can find many videos about that online. You know, if you want to listen to bisexual experiences on that, I'm telling you, that shit is not a lie. That shit is straight up. That is how it is. So I've had to shadow work that. That's been a source of contention within me. I've also now for a long time only had male partners. And, you know, I find that also just qualifies me as straight in a lot of people's minds. And that's been a real bother for me. And I do talk about that in the video I'm going to leave down below. So I think I'm going to leave that part here for now, because I do actually go into it and I get quite emotional about it in the video that I will leave linked. You know, so I guess if you want to go into that more, you can do, but that was definitely a big area of shadow work for me, where I had to acknowledge my privilege, hugely acknowledge my privilege as a straight passing bisexual woman, acknowledge why that was a bother for me, acknowledge also the counter arguments that bisexuals give about why that's not actually a privilege in certain ways, and go through that whole mess of soup. Again, it's linked to bigger things, right? It's linked to bigger things than just your experience. It's you know, it's got threads everywhere. I always say no piece of shadow exists in a vacuum. It's tied to things, and that could be other things in your life experience, or it could be things in wider culture. But then also on top of that, just wondering, like asking questions to myself about why it is that I have had several major relationships in a row with men, and women have not really had that much of a look in. There's been a few close calls, but essentially I have been in heteronormative relationships. Heteronormative, I mean, they appear heteronormative from the outside. So, you know, I've had to sort of unravel that and think about whether or not that bothers me. And also it does come up in conversation. People do ask me occasionally, like, is there a reason why you don't seem to date women? Would you now consider yourself to be straight? And that question gets under my skin. And so I've had to really shadow work that. I think I'm still unpacking that, because I come back to that dialogue in my own head, and not the dialogue about whether or not I'm straight. I'm absolutely not straight. And, you know, for a long time, well, anyway, I won't go on a tangent, but yeah, I have to come back to the dialogue in my own head about how I personally feel shadowy when these conversations come up, why I give myself a hard time and feel shameful about my identity and don't feel secure in my bisexual identity, and what that really means about my life journey and what I want it to mean going forward in the future. So that's been a really interesting source of shadow work, and I'd be particularly interested, if anyone's feeling bold, to hear experiences down below about that. I'm getting into this now, okay? I was uncomfy at first. I was like, what am I doing? But now I'm spilling the beans. I feel like, yeah, I can spill more beans now. It's fine. I definitely have had to do some shadow work around the whole journey of being a public witch. That has been something that has had its sticky bits and its like glassy, weird, jagged edges for me. You know, I am so damn searchable now. I've written a book on the topic. I'm in the middle of writing another book about the topic. I've done talks on it, workshops on it, that kind of thing. My book and my work has been featured in magazines and stuff, on websites, and it's great. I love it. Like, I really am so delighted with that. It makes me really happy to have a voice in this incredible community and to be able to chat with other witches and do work in that area. However, there's definitely been a weird, like, sort of shadowy basement area around that, where I felt very exposed, and I've had a questioning with myself about why that exposure is a problem. Why is it a problem if somebody Googles my name when they very first meet me, which would be, you know, kind of odd, but I guess it happens. Why would it be a problem if somebody searched me on Facebook or whatever and they went to my page instead of my personal profile, or they search me on Google and they looked at what I'm doing and stuff? And of course, it's witchcraft everywhere, and spirituality, personal development, all that stuff. Why would that be a problem? And that led me into a question of whether or not there is shame, any kind of shame, around what I do, what I say I believe, which I do believe, and all of that stuff. Like, why would it be an issue if somebody had that information as part of the gateway towards me? And for a while I asked myself, like, are you embarrassed? Are you ashamed to be a witch on some level? Do you think it says something about you that is uncomplimentary? You know, something that is undesirable, something that you wouldn't want maybe certain types of people to know, or maybe you don't want people from your past to know that this is what you're about now, which frankly no one from my past would be remotely fucking surprised about. But there are people from my past who were really mean to me, who bullied me at school and that kind of thing. And so I suppose I also had these notions of them seeing me like flying my freak flag and maybe having conversations about it with their friends or whatever, and feeling shame from an old place. I realized in my shadow working of it that it wasn't me as I am now. I'm not ashamed and I'm not bothered if people have that information. But the younger version of myself that was very out and proud about everything I was, but also was aware that there were consequences to that. There was isolation and there was discrimination that came from that. That younger version of me was still trying to negotiate the sense of protection and the sense of privacy that was needed then in the playground at school, etc., in my local community, which was very small, when I wanted to apply for jobs, you know, when I left school and stuff like that. I don't need to worry about that stuff now, but there's still a part of me inside that's kind of pulling on my witchy cloak and saying, no, don't go too out there. What are you doing? We're all over the internet. What's happening here? You know, so I think myself as I am now, a very proud, you know, witchcraft author and teacher, and myself as I was then, which had a more complex relationship with openness around spiritual beliefs, those two parts of me had to have a bit of a tug of war for a while. I've also spoken in at least one previous video that I remember about the fact that if someone comes into my life and they very quickly judge me for being a witch and having certain beliefs about magic and ritual and all that stuff and deity, if they come into my life and they judge me for that, what I would like to always be able to do is to just see it as a simple bullshit filter. I'm not going to make a judgment of them for their beliefs around my beliefs, but it does demonstrate to me how close we're going to get, how much energy I should probably invest in that relationship, how close, you know, how things are going to progress forward, because I'm not giving up these beliefs and they've been my beliefs for a long fucking time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with them, right? So people that would kind of raise an eyebrow or mock or laugh or think that means that I'm silly, I'm an idiot, I don't have enough intelligence to understand that this is wrong or whatever. People that come into my life with that kind of attitude, obviously it's better that I know sooner rather than later. So I try to always see my public profile and my public voice in the community as a part of that filter. It's like, yeah, we might as well know right out in the open straight away that these are my beliefs, this is what I do, it's part of what I do for a living. I do own cups such as this. You know, I do have several altars all over the place. Might as well know now before we get any closer and then realise that you're not going to accept that part of me or it's going to make you uncomfortable. But there is this other part of me, and I think, again, it comes from a younger place. It comes from a place in my early 20s, I think. There's another part of me that wants to impress people that are secular, atheist, highly intelligent people that just, in general, disrespect spiritual belief. As a rule, I kind of don't want those people to reject me. I want those people to still think it's okay for me to be in their club, you know? And I think it's interesting. I had to shadow work that because I was like, why? Why do you want to be in their club? If their club is a judgmental club where everything is just shot down, anyone who believes anything like that is shot down and ridiculed and seen as a lesser class of person, what's so great about a club like that? You know, but I really had to shadow work that because I would think, oh, well, I might not want so-and-so to know that I'm into that stuff. I might not want so-and-so to know that that's what my book's about because, you know, that's a person that I consider to be someone that might have an issue with it based on the fact that they think it's reductive, they think it's foolish, they might even think it's harmful, they might think it's weird, they might think it's cringe, you know, and so there'd be this part of me that I really had to shadow work. And that was the part of me that was like, don't show them, don't tell them, let's hope they don't find out. But you can't live like that if you have a public profile online, which is very specifically geared towards witchcraft. You can't be afraid of certain people knowing. And look, they may never know, like it might never come up. It depends who they are to me and how close we're going to get. But if they're going to be a person of any significance to me, they're going to know. Otherwise, that would be a very difficult ruse to keep up, wouldn't it? I'd be like, okay, this new person's coming tonight, but like no one's allowed to talk about the fact that I'm a witch. Just zip it, okay? No, we're not talking about it. I mean, that would just be so unhealthy and it would represent something so unhealed within me. I would have to do that work sooner or later, but I would have to do it. And so I had to do it. And I've done it already. Like, you know, I don't have those feelings anymore, but I did for quite a while. And as things got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and I'm still quite a small fish, but you know, the book's done well, I've been commissioned to write another one, etc. As I got bigger and bigger, I would have these moments of, I've learned this word recently, frisson, or frisson. I want to say frisson because maybe I sound silly with a French accent. But anyway, a moment of like fear and excitement at the same time. Like it's terror, but it's exhilaration. I would have those moments where I'd go, oh, it's happening. I'm known in the witchcraft community. Like, people are having conversations about my book. I don't even know those people, but the book's there and they're conversating about that, but it's got quite a lot of me in it, but it's not really me that they might be criticizing or reviewing or praising. But, you know, you have those super frisson moments. And, you know, I would have one of those moments and there would always be this little bit of me in the back that was like, don't get any bigger. Don't make this thing go. Don't stop. The gravy train's fine. It's running on biscuit wheels. Do we really need to make it into any bigger of a thing than it already is? Like, just stop now. It's getting out of hand. And then this other sort of more conscious, integrated part of me would be like, why? Why is it out of hand? Just because I have more and more and more to say on something that fascinates me and is a passion of mine, I'm going to keep talking. So that fearful part is the part that I needed to shadow work. And it might be linked to people pleasing. It might be linked to the desire to impress people. Certainly it was linked to the desire to not have people misunderstand me. And that's a big part of my shadow work when it comes to my selfhood. I do not like being misunderstood. I'm allergic to being misunderstood. I've had a problem with it for a really long time, right? And actually what I've come to learn is that if you want to have any kind of public profile, if you want to discuss your beliefs and your experiences online, you are going to be misunderstood. It will come with the territory. Some people will do it willfully. You're not going to be able to reply to every comment that you feel is a misunderstanding. You're not going to be able to get back to every email that you feel has a mischaracterization of you in it, you know? Yes, you are going to be able to address some things. That's the privilege of having a public platform. You can answer back, as I feel like I did with my Rebel Witch book critique video, where I discussed some of the critiques that people have leveled at me about the book Rebel Witch, and I'll leave that down below if you want to see it. You have the right of reply, which is fantastic, but you can't go around everywhere correcting everybody on everything. It wouldn't even be appropriate, let alone possible time-wise, for me to go around Goodreads and Amazon and everywhere, you know, all these places and be like, you're wrong about that. That's not why I wrote it that way. You have to let people have their views of you, and sometimes you will feel like those views are skewed or they're not really fully informed, you know, and you have to let that shit go. That is one of the biggest parts of shadow work really that I've done in the last few years, is like taking a deep fucking breath, letting it go, letting it all the way go, you know? Am I allowed to talk about the things I talk about when it comes to witchcraft, spirituality, self-development, emotional healing, any of that stuff? Do I have the minerals to talk about it, you know? That has been something I've had to shadow work on and off for as long as I've been talking about anything to do with this stuff on the internet. You know, the feeling of like, should I have a degree to be able to do this? Should I have had more experience? Should I get more certifications? Should I stop speaking about it entirely? Am I overstepping the line in any particular way? Do I need to give more disclaimers? Do I need to give more caveats? You know, what if the cultural tide turns against me and people decide that the only people that should be speaking on emotional healing are therapists? You know, that you should not actually be taking any advice from anyone that doesn't have that particular line of training, which I think is actually quite wrong. I think it's really important to hear from people that have the lived experiences of mental well-being issues. But in any event, all of these kinds of things have come up, and that's linked to a wider piece of shadow work that I've had to do around myself, which is very, very old, which is the whole question of the unlived life. I've done some videos about unlived lives in the past. If you go to the search function on my channel and just write unlived lives, you'll see at least one video come up that will be relevant. I can't think of what the videos are right now, but just do that and you'll find them. Unlived lives are really interesting. They're the lives you could have lived, the lives you may have wanted to live at a certain point, but you were restricted from doing so, or you simply took a different path because life is finite and you can't explore every eventuality. You can't go down every avenue, you know? So one of my unlived lives is, as an academic, as someone who went all the way. When I was younger, I absolutely believed through my entire body that not only would I be going to uni, but that I would become a doctor of something, and that I would be like an extremely institutionally learned individual who went all the way in the official way. Okay, I was going to take the official channels to go as far as I could through the best possible institutions with the highest reputations. Like, I saw myself as an academic in my head, and this was something that was very very catered to, or very very created by the adults around me. There was some very obvious signs that, like, I was very good at English. And this goes into another shadow of mine, actually, which is what I call the wunderkind shadow, which is the shadow that comes from having early promise and having your potential noted by adults around you, by teachers and by adults in your family, etc. That notion of being unusually good at something from a young age, and having that be pointed out, and having certain opportunities given to you, things offered to you, like going on a free writing course, for example, being given special attention by the English teacher who would write me a specifically different book list to everybody else in my class so I could do reading on a slightly more advanced level than them. These kinds of things. Adults saying things to you like when Kelly goes to uni, or saying things around you like when she does this, when she does this. The first time I was told that one day I would see my name in lights, I was like 12 or something. I was 12 and I'd written a poem for a family friend, a couple who were friends with my family up north, and it was just everybody was just wowed by it. And then when my mum was contacted by my teachers at a certain point. I think it was in year 4 or year 5, because I'd written a 9-page retelling of Beowulf, and they wanted to just simply tell my mum that, like, this kind of thing is not normal. This is not a normal writing age. Like, this is not what we would normally see from a kid of her age. So that needs to be nurtured and that needs to be fostered. That kind of thing is lovely. It's lovely to be noticed like that. It's lovely that any adult around a kid would notice their potential in some way. And believe me, I work with many clients doing what I do who did not have that same privilege. And so I do note it as a privilege, but it comes with its own baggage. It comes with its own sense of, like, who am I now that I might not want to do this thing? Who am I now that I'm not mentally stable enough to go to uni by any stretch of the imagination? I tried to take my own life in my A-level year at school. I couldn't finish sixth form. I was unwell. I was on suicide watch. So, everything was very derailed. So then when I came to do what I do now, I got my spiritual counselling certification, which was great. And I had like a background in healthcare and stuff. And I felt like, I've done readings for a long time. I'm very proficient at tarot. And I started doing readings for the UK College of Psychic Studies, and they gave me, really good testimonials, really good feedback. And I felt like I had a good working relationship with them for a while, doing readings for them online. And I felt like all of these things are strings to my bow. They're evidence that I can do this, that I'm proficient at it, that I'm not likely to harm anybody doing it. But there was always this other bit deep down inside me that was like, you can't talk about Carl Jung unless you have, a doctorate in something. You don't get to talk about these books because you are just a layman. You're just a casual reader. You do not have the right to regurgitate what you've learned in any kind of way that would mean paying it forward. You've not earned your position as a teacher. Why would you teach before you've learned? It took me a really long time to realize that there's nothing wrong with being an autodidact. There's nothing wrong with having taken a different path in life and done your own reading and come to some conclusions without going through an institution. I definitely have had a lot of insecurity about not being in the right educational position, not having taken on enough, institutionalized higher learning, which I haven't had any. So that definitely has been a big part of my journey with the business as well, and the content that I've created over the course of time, even writing blog posts where I would take, a psychological, like an idea from psychology, some kind of precedent from there, and I would attach it to a tarot card and say, I've been reading this book and I've been reading about something in psychology, and I really connect it to the star card. I'd always have this paranoid little version of me in my head that would be like, you can't talk about that. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And I will admit, there have been 1 or 2 people over the last 10 years that I've been doing this online. more than that now. That over a decade's worth of time that I've had a voice in the community, there's been 1 or 2 people that have really low-key, passive-aggressively tried to imply that as well. And have tried to imply by extension that everybody else in the community that utilizes like ideas from psychology doesn't know what they're talking about because they don't have the necessary degrees. And that's just as ridiculous as a scientist saying that you can't read books about a certain area of science and then discuss it because you do not have the relevant degrees. Okay, so is no one supposed to fucking discuss anything then? We're all just supposed to kick back and leave it to the people that got the degrees? Are you the only people that are allowed to be at the table? You can see that I've very much changed my mind about this now. But there's definitely still imposter syndrome inside me, for sure. But I don't think it's so much to do with my education now. I think it's more to do with gender, and it's to do with actually also just feeling like... even though with the gender thing, like obviously tarot in particular is dominated by women and femmes. So that makes it easier, but there's still a lot of stuff to do with imposter syndrome and gender in terms of like when you're a woman, you feel like it's not okay to succeed in career-wise at anything without that little voice in your head that says, is this fake? Is someone going to realise in a moment that I shouldn't be here, you know? That's quite common when you feel like you're doing well in any industry, right? You know, so there's that definitely, but there's also just this sense of like that I'm winging it at life, you know. I've never really felt like I grew up, truly. And I think a lot of people in their late 30s feel like that, and onward from that, they feel like, oh wow, I really thought I would have felt like an adult by now, but I don't feel like an adult. I don't feel like an adult, and so some of my imposter syndrome comes from that as well. Like I'll just be sat there writing my second book in a coffee shop and I'll be like, oh my god, I'm an adult. Like I even get that when I pay my water bill. I'm like, whoa, shit just got real, you know. Honestly, when I think about the fact that my mum had me when she was 23, I'm just like, wow, respect, mad respect. I can't even make the decision to get a fucking rabbit, you know. I can't even make the decision to get a rescue dog. I have to be ready. Like I'm not grown up enough yet. One thing that's been really nurturing for me about having the online platform and, you know, making things and saying things and having conversations and stuff is that I think it helped me do a big piece of shadow work around being such a forthright sort of alpha female type of personality, being you know, to all intents and purposes, as far as everybody can see, being a extrovert in the contemporary sense of saying it. Actually, technically I'm an introvert, but I present as an extrovert. You know, in the Myers-Briggs, I always come up as an extrovert, although there's not much in it, guys. There's not much in it. Yeah, but yeah, I take up a lot of space. I'm a big energy in a room. And that's a big thing I had to shadow work as well. That was really interesting for me when starting to share my ideas online in like 2011, 2012 kind of time. I started the blog in 2011 and the channel in 2012. I kind of started to realize that this was a really good outlet for that. Because as I sort of got into my later 20s, I realized that I wasn't really so much of like a limelight hog anymore. And I realised that I was in the past. And a lot of it was to do with seeking validation from a parent who gave love more based on approval. And by extension, a family that were very kind of like, you felt their love and their warmth radiate more when they approved of you. Okay, it wasn't as easy to obtain love when you weren't doing well, or when you weren't sort of like doing something that could be lived through vicariously by the family and placed as a star on the family name. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here? That kind of vibe, you know? So I think it's interesting because I used to be sort of a bit of a get on the table and do a little skit and do a little dance and impress everybody and remember all these things and show how, you know, show that like I'm competent and I'm capable and I can be theatrical and I can pull things out of the hat and I can impress and I can make people laugh. And I think that must have been very fucking tiring for me, actually. And then I kind of slid into my mid-20s and I started to notice other people doing it, and I would give them a very wide berth, you know, if they wanted to be very loud and very out there and interrupt and talk over and hold court, you know, and sort of play to the gallery. I would let them because I saw a part of my old self in them. I was like, yeah, I know that motivation to want to perform for people and be that court jester and be that person that when you turn up, the party starts, you know? But I stopped needing that as much, and I started to learn how to control my energy, because I realized that it would intimidate other people. I realized that I did intimidate people. I have intimidated all genders. I've definitely been intimidating to other women, for sure, definitely. And they have not known if I was actually friendship material, because I don't think they could quite figure out if I wanted to win and I wanted to be the most out there person in the room, or whether I was actually this fun-loving, joyful, open person that wanted to be their friend. I think I was mixing the signals because I didn't really know what I wanted, to be honest. So I find that interesting. The way I like to think of my energy now is that I imagine that I've got a great big dress on. Imagine something that like Carrie Bradshaw would wear in like one of the series of Sex and the City, because fuck the movies, frankly. But yeah, like a big, you know, like the one she wears when Big comes to get her from Alexander Petrovsky, or even, no, let's choose that one. It's a great big dress, right? I imagine that I'm wearing a dress like that. I'm wearing a goddamn gown. That's what my energy is like. And when I get into and out of a car, the gown spills out, and it has to be gathered up to get it in the car. And when you walk into a room, it takes quite a lot of space to let this gown do its thing. That's what I imagine my energy to be like. And it can be quite overwhelming. And I don't want people to have to stand back all the time because I've got this big energetic gown on. That's kind of the metaphor that I use to explain it. And so part of my shadow work of self has been to recognize that it's not my fault that my energy is big, but I also shouldn't make it anybody else's problem. I should recognize when other people don't necessarily have big gown energy, and maybe they want to fucking have their moment. Maybe they want to have their limelight. Maybe they want to feel like they're really, really being the one that is in the middle and being focused on. And that should be okay, you know? And it was even hard for me to shadow work that there was a part of me that wasn't okay with that, because I didn't want to believe that, because I like to think I'm a nice person on the whole, and I'm someone who's interested in other people, and I want other people to have their moment. And certainly I'm very congratulatory towards my friends when they have their moment. You know, I root for my friends. I root for people. I root for people I don't know when they just look like they're like feeling themselves. I'm like, fuck yes, you go, girl. You know, I like to feel that when I see somebody dancing or someone that looks fucking amazing, I have to go up and just be like, you look incredible. I'm that girl that will go over to another woman at a festival who has amazing makeup and just say, you look fucking airbrushed, babe. You look airbrushed. Like, wow, look at that. Did you do that yourself? You know, so I struggled with that bit of shadow work that was around like, you want to be the one and you need to calm down and let other people, you know. And especially in debate as well, my energy in debate is kind of wild. I never go ad hominem. I never go into like attacks or anything like that. I'm actually quite a decent debater because I was raised like that in my family. I was exposed to debate from young, you know. That didn't, you know, it wasn't always not ad hominem. Sometimes it went into dirty territory, but mostly I learned, you know, how to debate. But God, I want to persuade. And I want to cut. If I really know that I'm coming correct, I will just lay the facts out on the table like I'm shaking Mary Poppins' bag upside down. And I'm like, oh, you want to debate? Well, I came with all of this. And I've really toned that down. I've really just taken that all the way back and learned to enjoy the meandering of a debate rather than being like, I hope you know that either I'm going to hand your ass to you and you're going to hand my ass to me, and that's how it's going to go down in debate town. It's like, why though? Like, why? Because you need to prove something, you know. Where is that parent you needed to prove things to? They ain't here. They haven't been here for some fucking time. So you enjoy your debate, darling, and try and keep your friendship at the end of it. One final thing I wanted to just mention briefly is, you know, being online. It's like this in life as well, like not online, you know, like real world life, touch grass life. But it's also very amplified in my online life is I'm aging. You know, I look different to how I did when I first came online. My face is changing. My body is going to very slowly change, you know. And so that brings up a lot of shadows in terms of how I connect my worth to my youth and my looks, because of, again, the wider societal issues that massively encourage, especially women, to do that. The notion that your youth is your currency. And how I rile against that. I do not like that. I think we need to break that down. It drives me crazy. But at the same time, of course, I've fallen into it. Of course, I'm aware that that's how a lot of people think. And it makes me wonder what kind of time limit I have for what I do, if any. I know that in the witchcraft world, there's a great respect for cronehood, and, you know, that you earn your silver hairs, if you will. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that should be rolled out immediately across every society on planet Earth. But at the same time, there is something very aesthetic to what you do in the witchcraft world. There is something, and don't get me wrong, I don't think I use aesthetics to get my message across or to sell anything I'm selling. I like visuals, but I'm never going to be an aesthetic marvel. I'm too busy thinking about what I want to put into the content I'm making, and I don't want to be too tripped up by making it look perfect aesthetically. But, you know, I think that I have a worry. I have a worry about how much sway and how much power I will hold in rooms once I don't look as young as I do now, because every day we're getting older. And I have a worry about that online. It's an amplification of what I feel as a woman offline. It's amplified online. It's doing it, it's aging in front of thousands of people. Like, that is quite something. And I think I'm only just beginning to unpack that one. That one's big, you know? That notion of having to be really strong within myself to recognize that I don't have those thoughts about what it means to get older, and really being strong in myself and knowing that, yes, people have all kinds of thoughts. People have casual thoughts. I've had thoughts. Okay, this is really honest right now. But because of the conditioning that we've all been brought up in, pretty much, I have looked at like an actress aging and thought, oh, it's a shame. It's a shame that they're losing their youth. The more conscious part of me, the more like centered, integrated part of me does not think that. You know, that part of me thinks like, goddess is good. Live another day. You've earned all of this. You're fucking beautiful. But the part of me that's been twisted and maimed by the notion that I will be worth nothing when I'm old, that part of me thinks it's a shame to watch this person losing their power in public. And actually, we're not trained to think that about men. Men do still get that kind of like nasty comments or whatever underneath in social media posts. I noticed it the other day with a prominent actor who looks fucking stunning, but he's well into his 50s, going into his 60s by now. And there are a few people that are like, oh, you know, he should hang up his boots or whatever, which is absurd. He's going to act probably for as long as he lives, hopefully. But, you know, like, I see it with men, but it's grotesque with women. Come on, let's be honest. It's out of fucking control. The notion that women only have that currency. Men have other things. They have their money, they have their humour, they have their accomplishments. But, you know, when the milk of women begins to turn, it's just time to throw it out. We know that, okay? That's not even an opinion, it's a fucking fact. Come on. Look at all the issues with like news anchor women being thrown off the minute they get hit menopause, and men can just carry on, you know, like until they look like whatever they bloody look like when they want to retire. Because there's a different standard for men. It's a whole different ball game. Okay, so that propaganda is in me, and I'm doing the work of unpacking that, because I'm going to get older online. And I'll deal with that paranoia of people thinking and feeling that about me. And some people will, but it's not because my worth has diminished. It's because they have, their head is swimming with this fucking propaganda, and they haven't yet begun to do the work that I am now doing. And I have to let that go. I have to do what I'm doing. I have to keep doing it. I have to be the Baddywinkle of witchcraft. And if you don't know who Baddywinkle is, she's my ultimate inspiration for aging, and I'll leave her down below. Okay. That's everything. I could go on and on forever. I'm really, really sorry, but those are the things I wanted to mention. Okay, there will be an afterthoughts video for this over on Patreon. If you would like to go into more of a very deep dive with me into some of the things that most bother me about being public, about being an online witch, about interacting with people online, and the shadow work that I've done around that in relation to selfhood, I am definitely going to get very, very personal and perhaps a little bit ranty over in my Afterthoughts episode on Patreon. So become a Pop-Tart or a Dollface if you want to have access to Afterthoughts. You might also just want to consider becoming a patron in general this month if you're watching this in December, because we are going to have a tier-wide Christmas party live. So every tier will be invited. And if you are a Pop-Tart this month, there is going to be a Cauldron year-end release ritual. We are going to be working ritual together this month on Patreon. So there's a lot of different things that go on Patreon. Check it out. Another thing I want to say before I go, darlings, is please be aware of scammers in the comments down below. If you get a comment from me and it says something like, oh, hi, just thought you might want a reading, let's talk this through together. That's not me. That's not me. Report, block, everything else, okay? I'm trying as hard as I can to play whack-a-mole with the scammers. They are moving over onto YouTube. It is frustrating. I'm trying my best to work through it. Please don't forget that I do sell business mentoring sessions, spiritual counselling sessions. I sell tarot mentoring. I sell readings. You can go down below and check out all of the goodies that I've got over at my online store. And I do now sell unique one-off pieces of my collage work too. So if you would like to own a piece of art from me, or you know somebody who would like to own a piece of my original art, please also go down below and check out the art in store. Thank you for listening to this. I would love any and all comments. Much love and blessed be. Mwah.